PR Connections Radio presents the Love of Business podcast. The Love of Business, nurturing the entrepreneurial spirit. This show is brought to you by Paid Per Letter. Write letters and make a difference. paidperletter.com/Uncle Dan.
Awesome. All right. Welcome to the Love of Business podcast. I'm your host, Davin Sunvik. We've also got Edgar Rodriguez as our other host here today. So we've got a special opportunity here to talk about business and fatherhood. So some of the struggles, some of the joys about it. Edgar, I'll let you introduce yourself first. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll get into some of the first few questions here that we have for each other. All right.
Yeah, so like Davin mentioned, my name's Edgar, and I am the founder and CEO of Master the Network. And today we are in for a treat talking about, the balance of business and fatherhood, and how do you intertwine, the peaks and valleys of this. So I'm excited, Davin, to jump into this. So
yeah. So, cool. I'm Davin Sunvik, real estate entrepreneur. I own Sunvik Realty. We do residential commercial real estate brokerage. I am a new dad, so I've only been a dad for 18 or 19 days now. So fresh, but still learning some things, and it's fun to be able to participate in this one, kind of have a unique spin on our podcast today. So, Edgar, how do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump into it, right? Like, let's talk about some of the challenges for you, Davin. Like, you're fresh into fatherhood. I know you've been prepping mentally, because just like business, right? You think about business has no real roadmap until you're in the thick of things, right? Yeah, there's a framework, just like being a father, right? But kids do not come with instructions. Businesses, depending on the type of business that you're at, also doesn't for the most part have instructions, right? There are mentors, there are people out there that can help you. Now, with that being said, what are some of the common challenges that you foresee when it comes to, the work-life balance of, hey, I got to run the business, run my team, and got to help the spouse, and got to be a dad?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that I'm already kind of seeing is that, like, it's a struggle in the newborn phase for my wife to accomplish things and watch the baby, because she's watching the baby starting about this week pretty much all day. And then I'm going to be jumping in the evening there to give her some relief. And then what I'm realizing is like, I'm only able to accomplish what I'm accomplishing because I'm not at home, right? And so I have to accomplish, like, whatever I'm doing has to be worth it at this point. Like, if I'm leaving the house, it has to be worth putting that burden on my wife, right? And coming home, and then also kind of doubling up in that evening hour on, like, you got to do chores, you still got to, do your part and raise the kid, and then it digs into your sleep too. So it's helping me reprioritize my time, and I'm relooking at things on a new light and saying what's worth it and what's not, because being at home is way more worth it right now than a lot of things. So big
Especially
struggle.
this,
Yeah.
100%, right? And especially this being your first child, right? The challenge that I see, right, is you don't want to miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the beauty is that when you're in entrepreneurship, who sets your schedule?
Exactly.
You do, right? So I'll go back to, like, when I had my first daughter. I was in the corporate world at that time, so I missed a lot of that. And luckily for my spouse at the time, right, it's for her, she was able to be there for our daughter. However, I had to, after my 2 weeks, I had to go back. And after you burn PTO, it's, hey, got to go back. And knowing the beauty and balance is that, hey, look, I do got to pick and choose when I can show up, when I can be there. But at the end of the day, we know that, hey, if we have a solid team in place, we can take a step back because operations will still be happening, right?
Yeah.
Money will still be coming in, because if it's not, that's when it's like, oh, got to hit the panic button, and
Yeah.
I got to get back out there.
Yeah, that's another thing too, is like relying on my team is something that's uh it's been growing, but it's growing faster because necessity is the mother of invention, right? Like you can prepare all you want and you can make a system that like seems really good, but until you need it to work, it doesn't really show you how well it works. Because you can take a step back, like you said, right? As an entrepreneur, you go, you know what? I'm gonna take Tuesday off, and Tuesday goes well. Why? Well, you have all Monday to prepare your team, and like you knew you were taking Tuesday off. But what I'm realizing in like fatherhood is like yesterday, for example, no, 2 days ago, I had an incident come up at work, and I'm like, I can't, I can't take today off, right? Like I can't take the day off being a father and going to work. Like I have to be home, and so it forced my team to kind of work around it. And that was interesting to watch. And so it's like, okay, there's like this new adaptation that's going to happen where my lack of presence is not going to be planned. Sometimes it's going to be unplanned. And how well does the team run even when I'm not there in an unplanned situation instead of a
Yeah.
planned situation? So that's the critical key there.
Yeah, so having key team members and empowering them, right? And you knew, hey, you had 9 months to prep, right? We had 9 months of, hey, we're having a baby. Let's get the team ready, and let's put in systems and processes. That way, hey, we can take a step back, and you allow them to grow, right? And step up to the challenge when things hit the fan. So, moving on to the next one is, strategies for achieving a work-life balance. We talked about the time management part of it. We talked about delegating and setting those priorities. Now, let's talk a little bit about, like, growth in how you foresee the business continuing to grow as your, newborn also grows.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate. I work in a business that I mean, real estate is in high demand, right? And so your customer base is as big as you want it to be based on how many people can know you or will know you based on your activity level, right? So like the more activities you do, the more people you bump into, the more people you shake hands with, the more clients you're going to have. It's kind of just how the business works. And so what I'm realizing is like you're so dependent on all these people. Like there's more doctors that we have to work with than ever. So I'm building relationships with these doctors' offices, right? There's like parent groups at church to like get plugged into, and
Hmm.
and then you meet other people there, right? And so you learn how to kind of lean on people in a new way, and being willing to provide for people as well too, like being like, okay, how do you be a part of the team everywhere you go, right? That
Hmm.
way every moment's not wasted, and then more people are on your side. You got more advocates, right? Because you're out there willing to give. So
Yeah. Yeah, so it's finding those people you can confide in, and walking that journey of, hey, one, we're going to grow the business. Two, it's, hey, I want to pick your brain on, you've gone through this in fatherhood, right? You've gone through this in business, and mentors, right? That's the key word we're looking at, is mentors. Finding good mentors and knowing that we can rely on them, right? We have each other, and
yeah.
then we have our network. We have our COIs, right? We have our centers of influence, people that we
Hmm.
can bounce ideas and thoughts that are to continue to grow. So love that. Question I had on another one would be, how can fathers in high stress business roles, right, like you being the CEO of your organization, how can you ensure that you don't bring home work stress that can affect the family, right?
Yeah. Sometimes that means like saying no, or like being present in
Mm,
it. Um, And so like a lot of times like there are work things that you can't control that are really, I mean, like as the CEO, you can say it's your responsibility, but there's things that people will want to put on your plate that are really not your problem, right? And so sometimes pushing back and saying, you know what, like you can't come to me for this issue at this time. It's gonna have to wait. What I found is people will figure it out while they're waiting. Like people aren't just going to sit there and twiddle their thumbs most of the time. They're going to do some research and get it done. And they're like, oh, this is what we did. Cool. All right, let's communicate about it. Let's figure it out on Monday, right? And so, and then vice versa too. When you're at home, like communicating and saying like, hey, I'm going to not be home on these hours to be able to handle my workday. And so I cannot be bothered about the home unless it's an absolute 911 emergency. And in that case, don't call me. Call me
Yeah.
second. Call
Yeah.
911 first, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I've told that, you know, to a lot of my agents as well. And so now I actually have the opportunity to lead by example, because a big criticism I have had from my team was like, well, you don't have like, you know, like a dog, or you don't have a pet, or you don't have an elderly person that you take care of. That's usually what my team's working on right now.
Yeah.
Or I do have some younger team members who have kids. They're like, oh, you know, you don't get it. Now I have a kid, and I'm like, hey, if I can do it in my own home, that means that you can do it in your own home, right? And
Yeah.
so it is an opportunity there to lead by example too, and also to be able to relate with their own stressors and maybe get a little humbled in the meantime too. So there's room for growth and room for opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to unpack a lot of what you said, right? We talked about, not bringing home uh, the business related stress to the home life, right? Because that can cause a strain in the marriage
Hmm.
massively, right? And you got to be, when you unplug from work, and this is where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle, because I'll give you examples of multiple clients that we've coached, right? My team and I, where they struggle to unplug, and they're not able to be present at home. And something you said was balance, right? Knowing how, not just the balance, but I think the key word would be boundaries, right?
Hmm.
And you talking and communicating with your team. Communication is key, right? If you have clear communication with your team and they know, hey, when Davin's at work, I'm going to give you 110. But as soon as that clock hits, and even though in entrepreneurship there are no set hours, but you can set boundaries, right? And know, hey, when we're in the office, we go hard. When even though you're out and about, and there may not be a physical location, when you're meeting with your team, you say, hey, here's the game plan. Here's what it looks like. Let's set up our default calendars. If you guys need me, here are the hours that I'm available. That way, when you're home, you're present, right? You're there with your spouse. You're there with your kid and your family. Whether it is that you're taking care of a dog or elderly. And for me, it's for a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with, right, is we tell them to look in the mirror, and they kind of move their head a little bit, and we'll say, look, life is just like a mirror. Think about whatever you're putting out there is what you're going to get back, right? If your bank account doesn't match the lifestyle you're living, what do you think is going to happen? If
Yeah.
the type of lifestyle that you're perceiving, or you want to get after, right? Look at the type of car you live in. Look at the type of house you live in now, right? Yeah, we all need to establish a roadmap, but know that, hey, am I working towards something or am I working away from
Mhm.
it? And by setting those boundaries with your team, that's what's going to allow you guys to have a good balance, right? And that's what with parenting, that's just like business, man. It's setting
Yeah.
those boundaries and having clear communication that allows you not to bring home that stress.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and like those boundaries are necessary, right? And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs kind of like call their business their baby, because it really
Mm-hmm.
needs to be fed all the time. It really doesn't sleep that well, you know. There's emergencies that happen all the time, right? And so kind of the joke in our marriage is like, hey, you know, you're marrying a single father already, because like I already have a baby and that's my business, right? So and it's kind of funny because like a lot of the things that come up in parenthood are so parallel to business, like so parallel to business. And I'll watch my wife struggle with something, and she'll be like, why are you so calm? Like, why are you not like, worried about this? And I'm like, because I've already dealt with something like so similar or so much worse. Like, I already have the solution. Like, so I'm not worried, right? And so I get to watch her grow, which is really fun as a spouse to see her go through something so great. But it's also a little bit fun to kind of like. Uh, be a little bit more prepared. I feel like than I don't know. I don't know what the average dad experience is, but I
Mm.
feel like if you've never had the responsibility of owning a business, fatherhood could probably be a lot harder than it is if you've had that responsibility. So
Yeah, it's parenthood will have its ebbs and flows, right? You'll have good moments, bad moments.
oh yeah, yeah. There's gonna be
So,
stuff I don't know. Yeah. Oh
oh,
yeah.
100%.
And that's already yeah.
Unpredictability for sure. Now, how do you feel, Davin? Dads can leverage their professional skills to improve their parenting and vice versa.
So how can dads use their professional skills, like
Mm-hmm.
leverage that in their parenting? Oh
Yeah.
God, I feel like once you see success in one thing, it translates to other things. Like so, for example, if you were successful in sports, like it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful in your career. It just means that you've been successful before and you can lean back on that success and find new success again because you've learned how to find success, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like I don't think like sports makes somebody successful. Like it's being successful at something that makes you more successful at other things. And so
Right.
uh when you're in business and you're determined, you're like, I am, like, because at one point in my business, I had no money, no employees, right? Not a lot of customers. We were in the middle of a pandemic, and I still built a business, right? And so when you don't have those excuses and you do something, it's the same thing in fatherhood, right? Like if you show up with a bunch of excuses, you know, you're not going to succeed, right? So if you eliminate those excuses and you say, they're just obstacles, then you do it. So.
Yeah. So you talked about tasting success if it was in sports or other avenues, right? And knowing
Yeah.
that, hey, we've 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 reached the peak and tasted something, and
Mhm.
that is what helps you set that bar of like learning those, intertwining those skills, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's in business or at home, right? Knowing that you can figure out a way to, again, with team, right? Because in sports it's always a team effort. Whether it's a one man sport, you still have a coach, right? Or
Yeah.
coach is. Um, and you guys have to game plan, right? Just like in business, you got to game plan a lot of, hey, here's what we got to do. Here's what the vision and the future, in whether it's a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year roadmap. This
Yeah.
is where we're heading, right? Uh, you do the same thing with parenting, man. I'll flip it on the other side, on the parenting side. One thing I did with my youngest, or my oldest now, she's about to be 16 next year. Um, in I had to teach her, and at first I was told I was being a little stern, but you gotta give them guidelines, right? Told my kid, whether you're money driven, experience driven, or you just want to do things at home, right, and lounge around, your job is school, right? So I put in structure, and this is where the Marine Corps kicked in. And yeah, I didn't have any parenting skills at the time, but the Marine Corps kicked in and saying, hey, we're gonna structure
Yeah.
how your grades are, and for every grade, whatever you do, here's going to be allowance money, right? Like the harder you work, the more you'll make,
Yeah.
right? Think in business, right? You set that goal line, and it's like, hey, the harder we work, the more money we're going to make, right? But
Yeah.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel and make it that much difficult to work harder, right? It's how do you work smarter.
Mhm.
So same thing with my daughters in school, was like, hey, how can we counterbalance that and figure out a way to make you better, right?
Mhm.
And learn what you need to do, so that our goal is to teach our kids how to be better than we were, right? Our parents' goals were, hey, if I can advance my kid to do better than we did and make a dent in this world bigger than what we could. and
Yeah.
and that's and that's what we're trying to do through business, right? Is how can I leave a legacy, whether you're going to pass it on to your kid or you're going to pass it on to another team member. We started something because we wanted to make an impact. We have kids because we want to teach them there are other ways to be successful, right? And it's to keep that bloodline going. Just the business can live for a very, very long time, right? Think of companies that have been around since the 1800s,
Mhm.
right? And the legacy that they've built has created longevity, just like we are doing with family. So
Yeah.
wanted to hit it from that side too.
I want to expand on something you talked about. It's like you talked about like a game plan, right? With sports, right? And so like part of what, like, you can have a mission, you can have a vision, and these are all great things, and you have to have a plan. And you can't have determination without those things, right? You can't be determined for a result without a mission, without a vision, and without a plan to do that, right? And so, for example, like a little challenge we dealt with was with sleep, and we got a lot of criticism on our plan because we were like, we're determined that we're not going to be like lacking on sleep. Now, have we missed out on a little bit? Yeah, but like we created a plan and we stuck to it. And some days it didn't work that great, but some days it worked a lot better than not having a plan because we were determined. We're like, we're going to make it work, right? So we made some adjustments, and now my wife's sleeping a little better. I'm sleeping a little better. I'm able to go to work now, right? And so like we figured that out in like 3 weeks. And some people are like, 12 months into their, parenting, and their kid is still, waking them up in the middle of the night at a year old,
Hmm.
now I don't have a year old yet, right? I'm sure, there's a lot that can change in a year, but we were able to change like our baby sleep habits in 3 days of just like reading. That's all we did. We
Hmm.
just read and implemented something that
Yeah.
like it wasn't even my idea.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
I wasn't even the smart guy in the room, I was
That's
just the
hilarious.
soldier, I carried out the mission, and it worked.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Routine with kids early is key, right? Like
Mhm.
I I I, I struggle, not struggle, man, but I'm baffled sometimes when you're out and about and you see a kid pretty much running the parents.
Mhm.
So you, again, reflection in
Yeah.
business, right? Is if you allow your team to run you, and you're supposed to be the leader.
Mhm.
And in parenting, very similar, right? So for me, reflection huge is I'm blessed that the Marine Corps taught me structure, discipline versus motivation, right? Motivation is a feeling,
Mhm.
discipline is not,
Yeah,
right?
it's an action, right? It's
I'll take
objective.
I'll take discipline any day of the week over motivation, because once your motivation runs out, then what? So think of those two within. Hey, it's not strict. We're adding structure, right, through discipline within family, and we're adding discipline within business. Tie it all back together, right? Is there's certain keys that allow you to be a great father, right? Not every father was meant to be a father.
Mhm.
Not every man was meant to be a business owner. So you think about the two, and how powerful that is in knowing that, hey, when I do become a business owner, or I am a business owner, how do I counterbalance the two to continue to do great things, not only for my family, but to teach our kids that, hey, look what we can do if we add structure and we have, a great team. And when people say I can't find a good team, again, I'll use that, or we can't find good people. What are you putting out there? What are you doing to develop them, right? So
Mhm.
like you just touched on, hey, we read this book, we found something, we tried it and it worked, and now we're sleeping better.
Mhm.
Interesting how something so simple that you pluck out of a book,
Yeah.
we can read a book many times over, but if you never implement anything that you get out of the book, how do you know if it's going to work, right? You might as well not read the book if you're not going to try what's in the book.
Oh yeah. And what I also realized is like room for interpretation too, right? So part of that book talked about sleep schedules and how my wife interpreted it and how I interpreted it were two totally different things. And right.
Mm-hmm.
It's we had to create two plans, and I don't want to say do like an experiment, because like it really wasn't like a true experiment. It was more of like a let's try it this way, let's try it that way, right? Because it doesn't mean that I'm right just because I read it that way, right? And so trying it two different ways and being open-minded to being wrong like allowed us to find the right way over time, like so. It's the little things, just being open to it and being determined. So like you talked about discipline, like there's like motivation, there's discipline, and then there's determination, right? And like determination, even I would say even trumps discipline, because sometimes you can have discipline without direction and you will eventually lose it. But if you have determination, you'll never lose your discipline because the
Mm.
discipline has direction. So
Yeah. That reminds me of a quote, right? And I used to hear this a lot, and it's something that stuck to me, and it's knowing that if your why is strong enough, right? If
Hmm.
your why is strong enough, the how will figure itself out.
Yeah, and I like to think of the why as the determination, and as the what, or sorry, the how is like your discipline, and then the what you want is the motivation, right? You're motivated to get the car. That's the what, right? But like, why do you want the car? Okay, well, the car is going to attract more people into my life that I want to associate with, right? Those kind of people are going to get me the things that I want to get, right? Like, that might be your why, right? And then that's a big enough reason to get the car, right? Or for me, I like to go off-roading. That was the reason to make enough money to be able to afford a vehicle with that capability, right? And so
Mm.
yeah, yeah, you gotta have it.
Here's going to be our final question before we wrap up today. So
Good.
we'll hit this one real quick, and then we'll get wrapped up. But what role can technology play in helping dads manage their work and family commitments effectively? Because we are living in a world now where
Yeah.
technology is a massive factor.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh gosh, we have kind of a complicated philosophy in our house. And so my wife and I looked at each other, right? And we had a conversation, and we said, okay, at some point in time, we have to acknowledge that God made us enough, that like we alone are enough for our child. So we don't need to buy anything. And so I think if you look at technology with that frame of mind, then everything else is just helping you be enough and be more, right? Like you're already enough, you're just more than enough with the technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to have the right mindset first, because I think the market will sell you solutions to things that you don't need, right? First of
Right.
all, right? I think second of all, I think technology can show our children that the world is a big place, right? Like you don't have to be upset about small things that are happening, because such big things are happening that you can be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the benefit of technology. Like in when I was younger, right? Like if you wanted to experience something really crazy, you still had to get on a plane and go somewhere, right? Like YouTube didn't have everything documented yet, right? Like we had video, we had the news, but like it wasn't until the cell phone came out and the cell phone camera where you can't go anywhere without it being documented or filmed. And so anything that you want to see is now on the internet for free on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all those kinds of things. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the big leverage, is like I don't have to buy a plane ticket to show my kid what's going on in France. Not what the news is telling us is what's going on in France, but what the people in France are experiencing,
Mm.
experience the common man in anywhere in the country, and anywhere in the world. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can add in our perspective to each other, is just what we're experiencing.
Yeah, you said something powerful, and I've taught this to my daughters too, is especially as a girl dad. What happens on the internet lives on the internet forever.
Hmm.
So always remember that, right? Whatever you post will at some day potentially come back and haunt you.
Hmm.
So be very, very, very careful about what you put out there, because it may be detrimental, not today, but down the line, right? So knowing that, hey, technology is out there and it's a tool for us to use, but leverage it wisely, right? I'll say for me, because I know we got about 2 minutes.
Hmm.
For me, in technology, has been a massive game changer for me. Automations, if it's not on my calendar, it ain't gonna happen, right? Because calendars can coordinate between my cell phone, my computer, or where I gotta be. And if it's not on there, I'm not gonna show up. So key for me is just that, right? Is knowing leverage technology for the good, sift through the BS, and make sure you have strong stuff implemented. I'll finish it there. I'll wrap up with, for me, key takeaways are knowing that you have to have boundaries, balance, and grit. Right? Just don't give up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gotta have the grit. All right, let's take the last 30 seconds here and just wrap up. Edgar, how can people get in contact with you if they want to get help with their business, helping you master their network?
Yeah. Easiest way is if you go to the website, masterthenetwork.com. All my contact info is on there.
Cool. Rock on. Easiest way to reach me about anything real estate related, career wise, client wise, is davinsunvik.com. All right. Appreciate you guys for watching the Love of Business podcast. Hopefully, enjoyed a little change, and we'll see you guys next time.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.